I hope you're doing well, my friends. So, there's been a really interesting story making waves in the financial and political world. And honestly, it's one of those stories that makes you stop and ask, wait, can a president really do that? Let's talk about former President Donald Trump's attempt to remove a sitting member of the Federal Reserve and why the courts just said no. So, here's the situation. The White House recently tried to fire Lisa Cook, who is one of the governors on the Federal Reserve's board. If you're not super familiar with the Fed, think of it as the central bank of the United States, the people who help decide things like interest rates, which then affect your mortgage, your car loan, your credit card payments, basically, the cost of borrowing money. Pretty big deal, right? Now, Trump's team argued that Cook had committed mortgage fraud years ago by listing two different homes as her primary residence. They claimed that's a serious breach of trust and reason enough to get rid of her. But here's the twist. These allegations happened before she was even serving on the federal. And according to the law, Fed governors can only be removed for cause, meaning for misconduct while in office, and even then, there's supposed to be a fair process. The courts looked at this and said, nope, Cook wasn't given due process, and the removal attempt violated the rules. A lower court reinstated her earlier, and now an appeals court has backed that up, saying she should stay. It's worth noting, in the Fed's entire 112-year history, no sitting governor has ever been fired by a president. So this move was not just unusual, it was historic. And that makes me wonder, should the president even have the power to push out members of an independent central bank? Or do you think some accountability is needed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Now, why does this matter so much right now? Well, the timing couldn't have been more dramatic. The attempt to remove Cook happened just before a major two-day Fed meeting where they're set to decide what to do with interest rates. And interest rates affect all of us. If the Fed cuts rates, borrowing gets cheaper. Good news if you want a loan, but it can also fuel inflation. If they raise or hold rates higher, it helps cool inflation but makes borrowing more expensive. It's a balancing act, and every member of the Fed's board has a vote in shaping that decision. If one of those voices is suddenly removed, especially right before a vote, that could send shockwaves through the markets. Imagine being an investor, trying to predict what the Fed will do, and then hearing that the White House is trying to fire one of the decision-makers. Wouldn't that make you nervous? This is also about trust in institutions. The Fed is supposed to be insulated from politics, so it can make tough economic decisions without worrying about elections or popularity. If the White House could remove a Fed governor any time they wanted, wouldn't that undermine the independence of the central bank? And if that independence is gone, do we start worrying that decisions on interest rates are being made for political gain instead of economic stability? That's a pretty heavy thought. To be fair, Trump's team insists this wasn't political. They say it's purely about Cook's alleged ethics issues. But Cook herself strongly denies any wrongdoing, and again, the courts didn't buy the argument. They said she wasn't given a fair chance to respond, and that matters in a country built on due process. Now, what happens next? Well, the White House is expected to appeal to the Supreme Court. At the same time, the Senate just confirmed Stephen Miron, Trump's nominee, to fill another open seat on the Fed's board. So the makeup of the board is still shifting, even as Cook stays in place for now. All of this raises a big question. Do we want the Fed to stay truly independent, or should presidents have more control over it since their policies are so tied to the economy anyway? There's no easy answer, but it's worth thinking about. So yeah, this is about more than just Lisa Cook. It's about whether America's most important financial institution, the one that touches everything from your rent to the stock market, can stay above the political fray. And honestly, this case could set a precedent that lasts for decades. What do you think? Should the courts have blocked Trump's move? Or do you think presidents should be able to shake things up at the Fed if they believe someone can't be trusted? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know where you all stand on this. Alright, that's all for today's video. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and unpacking this wild story. If you found this helpful or thought-provoking, please hit that like button. Share this with a friend who follows politics or finance, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of stories that shape our economy and our future. I'll see you in the next one.